Mike
No.
here? No?
All right. All right, great. Well, seeing that we are all here, our minor number in attendance, I will call this meeting to order. We have our two commissioners besides myself, Hawkins and Peters, and right now, right off the bat, we've got our agenda and our minutes. And I don't know if you had a chance to review them, Mr. Peters, I suspect you did.
I did, yeah. Yep.
Any changes, additions, anything?
I would motion to approve the agenda.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. Call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll go on to the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So we're off to the variance request. Presumably everybody here has had an opportunity to review it, see it, walk it if you had a chance. Have a look-see. I went over there, obviously, what we're looking at, and seems pretty straightforward to me. I was feeling pretty sound on it in that it's the south side that's kind of moving out. But from what I'm seeing, and I'm going to actually hit you guys up since you're both here, and if one of you could come up here so we can get you on camera. I just want to ask a question on I just want to make sure that I did see this correctly, that on the south side where you have expanded out, it's not actually going to go beyond the end of
No.
that L.
No,
right?
no.
Right, it's just going to fill in like where the
It's
deck
gonna,
is.
so it's like where the porch is.
Yeah,
Now, there's two different plans, and your
Okay.
plan might be, what we realized is there's maybe not a hallway in the first plan.
okay.
But aesthetically, I actually just don't want it. I still want a window
Okay.
on that wall. So my goal is to sneak out as little as possible.
Yeah.
Because I like the aesthetics of it tucked in more,
Okay.
and I don't want to go back. I mean, I don't want to go past it because I don't
Past it.
like how that will look.
Okay. All right, great.
You're talking about
There's a
this
point of-
here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Point of mention, there was an amendment to the original request, right? And you saw the email. They're moving it out to roughly 15 feet as opposed to 11 feet, which is in the packet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, I didn't get an email like that.
Okay. There was an
Okay.
email.
So just for that hallway, because we put it in for the chair, and then we were like, oh, you can't actually walk behind the chair. So then we just had to add like 2.5 feet or something. So it'll still be tucked in. It just might come closer to the highway,
Okay.
but still in that square space.
I see, so is it,
I can even,
So instead of this being 11, it comes in another 4 feet, right? So it's roughly
oh, okay.
Just-
somewhere in
Yeah.
that range. She wanted to leave, there's a window here,
Yeah.
and they want to leave
That
some of
way.
that window there, and then
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
natural light. And
yeah, and I think it'll
Okay.
just look better, honestly.
I don't think
So
it has an
still
impact on the
on
drawing. Yeah, and
the
what
whole
we're doing.
distance, like, I
Yes.
mean, I guess that was my thinking, is if we're not moving further out than we already are,
Right.
to some degree. Seemed
It is
pretty-
I mean, it is, when we looked at it for different options, we tried to stay like as within the footprint,
Yeah,
you know, and since it's going towards 61,
yeah.
it seems like it's not very impactful to our next door neighbors behind.
Right. Thank you, Alyssa.
Okay.
Let's see, well, commissioners, do you have any questions or thoughts about this variance request?
I'm wondering why this needs a variance request.
Yeah, it did seem a little funny. I think it is because they are already within the 50 feet, and for that reason, we have to,
So here's
Go
another
through
one, the
this.
50 feet doesn't make sense.
Well, because it's backed up to, it was originally an R1
Mm-hmm.
property, right? And so just like we ran into with Hamilton Habitat,
Right.
yeah, where we're,
right, it changes the setback of the
once
commercial
she gets in there,
property.
then it's like, oh,
Right.
wait.
So
Right.
I would say this is
So
a
if
problem
this
that
was
needs
a
to be
mixed use-
addressed.
If this was a mixed-use property, or if it was just a commercial property, there probably wouldn't be any setback
Mm-hmm.
requirement at all,
Right.
so.
But I think it is that it's the proximity of this establishment to
Right.
the neighbors.
So,
But that's not changing, and so essentially, I feel like it does make sense, that it's when we, if you're ready, we can go to findings, unless you guys have an objection to that.
no,
Is
I
that-
don't have an objection to this. I think
No.
it makes sense.
Right,
I'm just bringing up the point that we have more work to do.
right, in terms of.
And I
getting-
want to make sure we are not forgetting that we have more work to do, because
Yeah, this is another one of those R1s
Mhm.
that, yeah,
it's time we got to work addressing those.
yeah, because we have plenty of spaces where we end up in funny business.
Right.
Kelly's always hounding about that mixed use, and that is an area where we could do some work. Mr. Peters, do you have anything?
No, I think it makes good sense for the building, for their use, and,
Yep.
and for the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Very little impact, if any, to
Yeah.
anybody else, and so.
Yeah.
I don't
that's
have
what
any
it seemed to
problems
me
with
as
it.
well. So, do you guys have any further comments? Okay, well then,
I
go
would just like
go
to
ahead.
support, I like this idea of, of the city doing work on this, on this in these funny situations. And it was a hairdresser. It used to be, so it was a little bit of a commercial building behind too, like if you really go to the history of the
Yeah.
county.
But it's always really been a kind of a legal non-conforming
Yeah.
building.
I mean, the
From
whole
the
thing
whole
is
thing,
the
right? It's
setback,
never,
right?
ever met a single setback
No,
requirement
like
since it's
many, many
transitioned
homes.
to
Yeah.
commercial
Other-
use. Which has
But
been
maybe-
virtually every case that we've had in here
Yeah, well,
since
forever.
the beginning of the year.
Well, at the beginning of the year, and since I started,
Yes.
6 years ago, it was, there are so many non-conforming properties within this town, it's pretty amazing. But anyway, going to the findings here, obviously, it is already a permitted principal use, what we're doing here in the 61 district. It is consistent with our comprehensive plan, as we've noted. Of course, in this case, it's specifically because it's supporting our year-round as well as our visiting residents. And it's not unreasonable. I think we've all said that. It's not an unreasonable request. And again, going back in history, we can see that the landowner in this case, it's not created by the landowner. It is what it is because it's funny. It's an odd lot. But more importantly, again, going back to the comprehensive plan, it's because that this is a needed service in our community and it's not being met in another way. Obviously, it's not going to change the essential character of the neighborhood at all, in my opinion. And I see no reason not to approve this variance.
I'll make the motion to approve the variance request for Hedstrom in the dental office. I don't know how to word it exactly.
I will second that motion.
All right. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. There we go.
Easy.
Yeah, that was good. That's pretty straightforward. So, moving on, only new business was a public hearing notice process. Is that what we were talking about the other day, Patrick?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I prepared a video to just run you through what we do in the office, and what Hayden does in the office, to notify people when there is a public hearing. So
Got it.
take it away, Hayden.
All right, and you guys are free to
Thank you.
go.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much for
thank you
showing
very
up.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When the city receives an application for a variance or conditional use permit, the Planning and Zoning Commission is obligated to hold a public hearing. Notice of the hearing must be posted in a local newspaper no less than 10 and no more than 30 days before the hearing. Private property owners within 300 feet of the property filing the application must also be notified by mail at least 10 days prior to the hearing. The city identifies the properties to notify using the county's mapping software and tax records. On the map, we draw a radius 300 feet from the widest edge of the applicant's property and create a mailing list using the tax records associated with the parcels in the circle. Private property owners within the circle receive a mailing describing the reason for the public hearing and a map indicating the property in question. When a current mailing address for a landowner is not available, Staff attempt to make contact via phone, email, or in person to ensure that all stakeholders have an opportunity to participate.
That's it.
Ta-da!
So,
Excellent.
there were some questions about that process at 2 meetings ago,
Right.
or 1 meeting ago,
Oh, yeah, I guess.
2 regularly scheduled meetings ago. So this is just the response to that. So if you don't have any questions, that's really that agenda item.
Okay. Great. Commissioners, any questions for Patrick
Well,
on that?
I do have a question. Now, that makes sense. The 300 feet makes sense. When we encounter somebody, like, for example, we don't, I think where it came into confusion was the language that's presented. You know, in the first case with Hamilton Habitat, I'll just speak frankly, the confusion, like, you can get a generic mailing that says, hey, this is up for debate, right? This is being brought to the city planning and zoning, and that's fine. But I suspect there was no information in that told them, by the way, your property is going to be impacted as a result of this possible rezoning. And so that was more or less the process, like how how empathetic or sympathetic are we in some of these mailings to people that we know should be included in the conversation, and how much information are we providing those folks? We weren't provided any information at the city at this level either, right? I mean, we were very excited about the proposition of
Yeah.
rezoning that property. I think it's
Yeah.
fair to say.
Yeah, and I mean, again, to the language point, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, that's why we paused it, because we were like, wait a minute, if
Right.
this is gonna impact these guys, we gotta make sure that they all know. So I think that is kind of that process, as we saw there, of course, that makes sense. I think it is that somewhere in there, we have to enumerate what the impact is going to be on you as the neighbor or whatever. Because I think that was the missing link. Like we said, like, this is happening or this property is gonna have this thing happen, and they were cool with it too. They were like, oh, that's great. Not knowing that it was gonna have this further impact on them once it was rezoned. So I think that next step is what we need to let people know ahead of time. Because we kind of ended up wasting everybody's time, because we couldn't do it, or, well, we didn't do it because the neighbors were not going to be happy about it, and she didn't want them to be unhappy either, so.
So I'm wondering if the language for a variance, like enclosing a deck on this last one, no big deal. People
Yeah.
probably, it doesn't really affect their property. It affects the other person's property. So, but a rezoning request maybe needs a different language on the notice saying this will affect your property, because when you have the commercial versus the homestead or residential, I mean.
Coming up against each other.
Yeah, nobody knows all that stuff in there. And so.
Or few people.
Right. And so I think maybe we need to clarify for rezoning notices.
Yeah, and that, yeah, I think that's exactly right, because that does have a further impact than. what we just
And
did.
conditional uses I would include.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That as well.
Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
so if we could, so in terms of changing that process, Patrick, I'm just want to clarify, is that just something we can ask to be done? Does that have to go through a process with the administrator, or?
The basis of this process is statutory requirement
Okay,
at this point. So whatever, I believe, however you guys want it to work is what we'll do as a staff to make it work.
okay, so that's.
As long as we're following that.
Okay, so you have to follow that.
Statutory
Yeah.
would
We
be
can
the set
add.
minimums,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
the set
Yeah.
minimum
Okay.
effort required, right, is the statutory limit or whatever, presumably.
Okay. All right, so then, well, I would say, commissioners, why don't we do as our homework, come up with the things that we want it to say, essentially, and craft it into something that we can give to Mike and Patrick and Hayden, so that they know kind of what we want to see happen when it comes to, changing or changing the zoning or anything like that where it might really impact the neighbor, not like I'm, putting on a porch or something like that. but
Would
things
you,
that-
would you email me a copy of something that would have been sent out in that rezoning request? Would you have something like that?
Yeah,
So
we
I
can do
look
that.
at that?
Yeah.
See what it actually said, before I present a bunch of
Yeah.
amendments that I don't.
Yeah, no,
Or-
you're right. Yeah, so
Yeah, we
that
can
would
do
be
that.
something to run from. So that'd be great, Patrick.
I'll send it to all of you.
Yeah, so we can look at that and then think about like, well, okay, we had this experience. What do we know that we would have preferred that the neighbors know before this goes forward? Yeah, because you're right, with the conditional use, that also can impact that.
Cool.
Well, if that sounds good for a little bit of homework for next time, I would say we're adjourned unless you really want to stay.
Sounds good.